So now we are into the third hour of fluids. In this hour, we will talk about surface tension. Now, what exactly is surface tension? The name itself, surface tension. The tension on the surface tension. So we have to first talk about forces. Now, when we talk about forces, there are two types of forces between the molecules. They are called cohesive forces and they are called adhesive forces. What are cohesive forces? The forces between the same type of molecules are called cohesive forces. Same type of molecule, cohesive forces. And the forces between different type of molecules are called adhesive forces. Now, to understand this cohesive force and adhesive force, let's take an example. A beaker made up of glass in which we have filled up water. Okay, so we have filled up water. Water is what? H2O. So here there will be many H2O molecules present. The forces between two H2O molecules are called cohesive forces. The forces between same type of molecules are called cohesive forces. And the forces between different type of molecules are called adhesive forces. So the forces between the molecules of glass and the molecule of water will be called adhesive forces. So what are cohesive forces? The forces between same type of molecules. What are adhesive forces? Forces between different type of molecules. Simple. Now, but why do we have to study surface tension? Because the property of the surface molecules are different from the bulk molecules. Why is the property different? Because on the surface molecule there is a net cohesive force which is absent in the case of bulk molecule. To understand this, visualize a container. And in the bulk of the fluid, somewhere here, away from the surface, visualize one molecule of the fluid. Due to all the other molecules present in the vicinity, there will be attractive forces. And these attractive forces will be in all directions. So if I ask you what is the net force on this particular bulk molecule due to all the other fluid molecules around it, so you will say, sir, you are trying to ask the net cohesive force now. So the net cohesive force will be zero. As force is a vector quantity, all the forces in all the direction will cancel out each other. So you can say the net cohesive force on a fluid molecule present in the bulk is zero. So if you visualize one molecule in the bulk of fluid, you will say the cohesive force on the fluid molecule in the bulk is zero. Why? Because force is a vector quantity. All these forces in 3 dimensions will cancel out each other. Now let's visualize about one fluid molecule present on the surface. So if there is only one fluid molecule present on the surface, due to all the other fluid molecules, there will be forces of attraction on it. But understand that there is no fluid present above this particular molecule. There are only fluid molecules present below it. So if you visualize just one fluid molecule present on the surface, then due to all the other fluid molecules, there will be cohesive force on it, right? Now this time, the net cohesive force is not zero. Why? Because sir, there are no vectors above to cancel them out. And the direction of net cohesive force, because of symmetry, you will be saying that the direction of net cohesive force will be downward. So what I tell students is that for a fluid molecule present in the bulk, the net cohesive force is zero. And for a fluid molecule present on the surface, the direction of net cohesive force is towards the bulk. Remember that for a fluid molecule present in the bulk, the net cohesive force is zero, and the net cohesive force on a fluid molecule on the surface is towards the bulk. If tomorrow you get a drop rather than fluid filled up in a container, then on one molecule present on the surface, the net cohesive force will be towards the bulk. Here, on this molecule present at the lowest most point, the net cohesive force will be towards the bulk. So why we are studying a topic of surface tension? Because the property of the surface molecules are different from that of the fluid molecule present in the bulk. And why is the property different? Because on the surface molecules there is a net cohesive force towards the bulk which is absent in the fluid molecules present in the bulk. So let's move on to understand. Now we will talk about surface potential energy. So what is surface potential energy and why is there a potential energy associated? Now you need to be very cautious when I am telling you this thing. If you think that one molecule moves from bulk at point A to the surface at point B, visualize just one fluid molecule moving from bulk to the surface. When the fluid molecule is in the bulk, what is the net cohesive force on it? Zero, because force acts from all directions. When this same fluid molecule is on the surface, what is the direction of net cohesive force on it? Towards the bulk. So I ask you a question. If a fluid molecule moves from bulk to the surface, what is the direction of cohesive force on this fluid molecule as it moves? So sir, if the fluid molecule moves from bulk to the surface, the direction of force is towards the bulk. The direction of net cohesive force is towards the bulk. So if a molecule moves from bulk to the surface of fluid, the net cohesive force near the surface is towards the bulk. As the fluid molecule starts reaching the surface, near the surface, it starts experiencing a net cohesive force towards the bulk. Now tell me, when the fluid molecule moves from bulk to the surface, what is the direction of net cohesive force? Towards the bulk. What is the direction of motion? Away from the bulk. So the force is towards the bulk, displacement is away from the bulk. If I ask you what will be the sign of work done by cohesive force as a fluid molecule moves from bulk to the surface, what will be your answer? So sir, as a fluid molecule moves from bulk to the surface, the direction of force is towards the bulk, the displacement is towards the surface, both are in opposite direction. So the sign of the work done by cohesive force will be negative. So you will say, hence the work done by cohesive force is negative when a fluid molecule moves from bulk to the surface, the net work done by cohesive force on the fluid molecule is negative. Now we know the definition of potential energy. We know that change in potential energy equals to minus times the work done by conservative force, right? So change in potential energy equals to minus times the work done by conservative force. As here, as a fluid molecule moves from bulk to the surface, the work done by conservative force is negative, the change in potential energy has to be positive. So as the work done by conservative force will be negative, the change in potential energy has to be positive. So as more and more fluid molecule move towards the surface from the bulk, the surface potential energy increases because the change in potential energy is positive. Sir, but how can more and more fluid molecule move towards the surface? Visualize this. Let's say you have got this container whose three sides are fixed. So this is fixed, but this side can be moved. If I turn this particular side, that can be moved. The same fluid will spread over. The height of the fluid will decrease and the surface area, what will you say about this surface area? So if sir, this third side can be moved, the surface area will increase. If I say that surface area has increased, it means that now more number of molecules will be present on the surface. Yes. If more number of molecules will be present on the surface, it means that more number of molecules have moved from bulk to the surface. As the molecules move from bulk to the surface, the work done by conservative force will be negative. So the change in surface potential energy will be positive. So the surface potential energy will increase. So the change in surface potential energy is positive as more and more molecules move from bulk to the surface. So as more and more molecules move towards the surface, the greater is the surface potential energy. Keep this in mind. Now we need to talk about surface potential energy even more. So we know that the surface potential energy is directly proportional to the surface area. The more the surface area, the more the number of molecules on the surface. The more the surface area, the more the number of molecules on the surface. And the greater the number of molecules on the surface, the more negative work must have been done by cohesive force in bringing them to the surface, and more the potential energy would have increased. So for a fluid, we say the surface potential energy is directly proportional to surface area. As greater the surface area, you have greater number of molecules on the surface, right? So Every time physicists see a proportionality, what do? They add up a proportionality constant. So we know that potential energy is directly proportional to surface area. When we multiply a proportionality constant, that proportionality constant has been named T, where T represents the surface tension. So the greater the surface tension for the same area, you get the greater the surface potential energy. Now, for higher surface tension, the attraction force between the molecules has to be large or small. So, the greater the force of attraction, the greater will be your net cohesive force near the surface. The greater the force of attraction, the greater will be the net cohesive force near the surface. The greater the net cohesive force near the surface, the more will be the work done. The more will be the magnitude of the work done, the more will be the change in surface potential energy. So, for molecules which have got greater force of attraction between them, the surface tension is higher. For the molecules which have got lower force of attraction between them, the surface tension is lower. So, surface potential energy equals to surface tension into the surface area. Now, this quantity T denotes surface tension, and I will be using the same for the entire course. Moving on. So, if we have a fluid drop of radius r made up of fluid of surface tension T, what will be the surface potential energy? So, if you have a fluid drop of radius r, then the surface area of this fluid drop in 3D will be 4 pi r square. So you will say the surface potential energy associated with this particular drop will be surface tension times surface area. So the surface potential energy will be T into 4 pi r square. Before we talk ahead, let's talk about film, because this is really important and a simple thing. Let's say we have a rectangular frame with one side that can be moved. So you have got rectangular frame with one side that can be moved. So it can be moved away, it can be moved towards. We took this whole rectangular frame and put it inside a soap film, a soap solution. Remove the soap film. Remove this, we took this whole rectangular frame. Okay, so we took this rectangular frame and put it inside a soap solution and take it out. What we get in the end is a soap film formed in the loop, within the rectangular loop, right? Now, once you have this soap film formed, question is on how many surfaces there are fluid molecules present. Remember that a film has got two surfaces. If we look on the soap film from the side, what will I see? Looking from the side, I will see that there is air, then there is soap film, then there is air. So there is air, then there is soap film, then there is air. If we are looking from front, we have got air, then the soap film, and again behind the soap film we have what? Air. So fluid molecules are present on this left surface as well as on the right surface. As more and more number of molecules are present on the surface, the greater is the surface potential energy. So remember that a film has got two surfaces. So if I say the length is L and the width is B, and the surface tension of this soap material is T, tell me what is the surface potential energy associated with the soap film formed on this rectangular loop. So you shouldn't take the surface area on which the fluid molecules are present to be LB. No, you should take 2LB. LB in the front and LB on the back. So a film has got two surfaces. You should take the surface area as 2LB, and you will write the surface potential energy for this particular film to be surface tension into 2LB. So remember this one simple thing, that a film has got two surfaces. Now talking ahead, a film has got two surfaces. A soap bubble in air is also a spherical film of soap. When we have a soap bubble in air, what do we have? Sir, we have a soap bubble in air. No. Understand that we have a thin spherical coating of soap. Inside the bubble there is air, yes. Outside the bubble there is air, and there is one thin film, right? Now again, a soap film has got two surfaces. There is this inner surface and there is this outer surface. So remember that a soap bubble in air also has got two surfaces because it is also a film. Okay, so what we have learned in this particular page, first, a film has got two surfaces. Student, do this error all the time. A film has got two surfaces. Second thing, bache, a soap bubble in air has got two surfaces. There is air inside, there is air outside. So a soap bubble in air has got two surfaces. Is a spherical film of soap. Keep this in mind. So moving on. Now there is a question. Question goes like, there is a rectangular frame with one side that can be moved. Question is, the figure shows a film made up of soap with surface tension T. So here the surface tension is T. Question is, if the movable side, this side, is moved towards right by a distance x, find the change in surface potential energy. So if you move this movable side by a distance x towards right, what will be the change in surface potential energy? That's what they are asking. So you will say surface potential energy equals to surface tension into the surface area. From here we can even say the change in surface potential energy equals to surface tension times the change in surface area. Now when you move this towards right by distance x, what is the change in surface area of the film? You will say, sir, this length is b and this length is x. So the change in surface area on one side will be bx. But remember that a film has got two surfaces. So the change in surface area will be 2bx. Why this 2? Because a film has got two surfaces. So when you move it by distance x, on the front side, more surface area will be created equals to bx. On the back side also more surface area will be created equals to bx. So the change in surface area will be equals to 2bx. Now on moving it by distance x, the change in surface area will be 2bx. So the change in surface potential energy equals to surface tension times the change in surface area, which is 2bx. Simple. The whole purpose of taking up this illustration was that you need to understand that a film has got two surfaces. So let's see the next example. Next example goes like, there is a drop of radius r. Question is, if a drop of radius r made up of a fluid of surface tension T is divided into n identical small drops, determine delta U. So you had one single drop of radius r. This single drop of radius r has been divided into multiple small drops of identical radius and drops. They are asking you what is the change in surface potential energy, given that the surface tension is T. So you will say the change in surface potential energy has to be equals to the final surface potential energy minus the initial surface potential energy. Now assume that each small drop here, each small drop, they are identical drops, each small drop created here has a radius r. So if each small drop created here has a radius r, then from volume conservation, saying that initial volume of the fluid in the drop equals to final volume of the fluid in the drop, we can find out the final radius. So we can say from volume conservation, the initial volume, which is equals to 4 by 3 pi r cube, has to be equal to the final volume of all these drops combined. Now each small drop here has radius small r, yes sir, and there are n number of drops. So the final volume has to be equal to total number of drops multiplied by volume of one drop. So cancelling out both the side, 4 pi by 3, 4 pi by 3, you will get the radius of big drop whole cube equals to n times the radius of each small drop whole cube. So you will say the radius of each small drop equals to radius of big drop upon n raised to power of 1 by 3. This will be the correlation. So radius of each small drop equals to radius of big drop upon n raised to power of 1 by 3. Now once this is established, our mission is to find the change in surface potential energy, right? So you will say the change in surface potential energy has to be final minus initial. You can write the initial surface potential energy as surface tension time initial surface area. The surface tension is T and the initial surface area is 4 pi r square. This is the initial surface potential energy. Now how to write the final surface potential energy? So there are n drops, yes, and we can write the surface potential energy for each drop. For each drop here of radius small r, the surface potential energy will be surface tension into 4 pi into small r square. Surface tension times surface area. But there are n drops. So you will write the final surface potential energy to be n times the surface potential energy of each small drop. That will be T into 4 pi r square. So the change in surface potential energy has to be equals to final minus initial. Final is n into T into 4 pi r square minus initial, which is T into 4 pi r square. In place of beta r, substitute capital R upon n raised to power of 1 by 3. When you do this and taking T4 pi common, so what you get is T4 pi times n into r by n raised to power of 1 by 3 whole square minus r square. Taking r square common, what you will get is T into 4 pi into r square, and look here you have got n upon n raised to power of 1 by 3 whole square. So this becomes n upon n raised to power of 2 by 3, which is nothing but n raised to power of 1 by 3. So what you get here is now, taking after r square common, you get T into 4 pi into r square multiplied by n upon n raised to power of 2 by 3, that is n raised to power of 1 by 3 minus 1. So you get T into 4 pi r square into n raised to power of 1 by 3 minus 1. This is the solution. Okay. Let's see the next example. So the question goes like, determine the amount of work done to double the radius of a bubble of soap of radius r having a surface tension T. So there is a soap bubble of radius r. Remember that a soap bubble in air has got two surfaces. There is air inside, there is air outside. And this soap bubble of thin film thickness has a radius r. Question is, how much work has to be done to double its radius? That's the question. So sir, what to do here? See, we know that the initial surface potential energy when this soap bubble has a radius r will be equal to how much? Surface tension into the surface area. If you write this, you will be completely wrong. Why? Sir, it has got two surfaces. So the surface area shouldn't be taken as 4 pi r square, na? 4 pi r square because of outer surface plus 4 pi r square because of inner surface. So when you write the surface potential energy of the soap bubble, the initial surface potential energy, you should write the initial surface potential energy to be equals to surface tension times the outer surface area multiplied by 2. Why 2? Because there are two surfaces. So you will get T into 2 into 4 pi r square. This will be your initial surface potential energy. Now when you double the radius, the outer surface area becomes 4 times, because if surface area proportional to r square, as well as the inner surface area becomes 4 times, right? So the overall surface potential energy becomes 4 times. But how to write it? See, you will say here 2 because the bubble of soap in air has got two surfaces. The final surface potential energy will be written as 2 times the surface tension into 4 pi into final radius whole square, which is 2r whole square. So why this 2? Because the bubble has got two surfaces. T because of surface tension, and here in place of r we have substituted with 2r. So when you square this 2r now, this becomes 4r. So from here and here, if you need to write the change in surface potential energy, you will say the change in surface potential energy equals to final minus initial. So it's final quantity minus initial quantity. Take the common part outside. So the final part is 8 into 4 pi r square t. See bachcho, this 4 into 2 becomes 8, and this 2 square becomes a 4. So you get 8 into 4 pi r square into t. And the initial surface potential energy is 2 into t into 4 pi r square. So that is again 8 pi r square t. When you subtract them, here you have got 8 into 4, 32, minus 2 into 4, 8. 32 minus 8 gives you 24. So you get 6 into 4 pi r square t, and that gives you 24 pi r square t. So the change in surface potential energy is 24 pi r square t. So the work that is needed to be done to double the radius of this bubble is again 24 pi r square t. Okay, let's continue ahead. So now we will talk about force of surface tension. Visualize that you have a container of circular cross section containing fluid, and you are looking on this fluid from the top. So what you will see is a circular surface of the fluid. So top view of glass filled with a fluid. If you visualize just one molecule of fluid present on the surface, what will be the forces because of all the other fluid molecules present on the surface? So you will say all the other fluid molecules present on the surface will apply attractive force, and the net cohesive force because of all the other molecules present on the surface. I am not at all talking about the fluid molecules present in the bulk. No, because of all the fluid molecules present in the surrounding on the surface, the net cohesive force will be zero. Only the surface molecules I am talking about. Now, rather than looking at a single molecule present on the surface, if we look at a line of molecule, now I want you to be cautious here. When we think of the forces on a line of molecule, then on each molecule there will be forces from all the other molecules in all direction. So the net force will be zero. Same will be the story of the second molecule. Same will be the story of the third molecule. Same will be the story of fourth, fifth, sixth molecule, and so on this line. The greater the length of the line you will choose, the more will be the number of molecules. The smaller the length of the line you will choose, the lesser will be the number of molecules. When we write the force of surface tension, we write the force of surface tension on one line of molecules due to the molecules present on one side of it. So now forget one half, forget this half. Just visualize what will be the force of surface tension due to the other half. So you will say, sir, due to right half of this line, on this single molecule, there will be forces here. So these are the forces only due to the molecules present on the right half. So the net cohesive force due to all the molecules present on the right half will be perpendicular to this imaginary length. So if rather than visualizing one molecule, you visualize a line of molecule and visualize the forces due to one half, you will get the force to be perpendicular to length, and the greater the number of molecules on the line, the greater will be the value of force. If the force on one molecule is x, if you consider two molecules, the force will be x plus x, 2x. If you consider three molecules, the force will be x plus x plus x, that will be 3x. So greater the length you are considering, greater will be the number of molecules, and greater will be the number of molecules, greater will be the force of surface tension due to the molecules present on one side of that line. Here I am showing forces due to the fluid molecule present on the right side of this line. So we can say force due to other molecules present on the surfaces look like this. The force on an imaginary line of length L is directly proportional to the length. Because the greater the length, the more the number of molecules. The more the number of molecules, the greater is the force due to the molecules present on one side. Now every time physicists find a proportionality, what do? They add up a proportionality constant. So here the proportionality constant is found to be again T, the same surface tension. What you need to remember is the force of surface tension is along the surface. The force of surface tension on one imaginary line is along the surface and perpendicular to the length of that imaginary line. So if this is your imaginary line, the force will come out to be perpendicular to it. And if you have got this line of length L and this fluid has surface tension T, then this force will be equals to TL. So the force of surface tension is along the surface perpendicular to the length. Now let's see one question to understand this. So here we have got this rectangular frame with three sides fixed and one side movable, which is connected to a pan. The length is given as L, and they're asking determine the mass to be placed on the massless pan so as to keep the movable side in equilibrium. You want this force side to be in equilibrium. How much mass has to be placed on the pan? Now a film has got how many surfaces? Two surfaces. Because of the front surface, there will be a force of surface tension on this movable rod perpendicular to length TL up. Because of the back surface also, there will be a force of surface tension TL up. They are asking you how much mass has to be placed in the pan so that the system remains in equilibrium. So the weight of this mass mg should be balanced by these two forces of surface tension. So mg equals to 2TL. So you will say, assume that we place a mass m on the pan. For equilibrium, mg has to be equals to 2TL. Why do you get a 2? Because there are two surfaces. So they are asking you how much mass has to be placed. So the mass that has to be placed has to be nothing but 2 times surface tension times the length of this movable part divided by g, 2TL by g. Let's see the next example. Let's talk ahead, and this is important what we are going to talk about now. Now, puncturing a film. If you take a rectangular frame, dip it in a soap solution, take it out, what do you get? So we get a soap film. Now, you take a thread, tie its two sides, immerse it in the same soap solution, take it out and gently place it on the top of this film. So when you place it, you find this random shape of the thread loop on the film. Now when I am saying here puncturing the film, we are going to puncture the part of the film within the loop. So this is how we get a thread loop on a film, and we are going to puncture the inner part. So visualize a soap film created on a rectangular loop. Now we have placed a thread, and this thread has got a random shape. Now if you look at one small part of it, there will be force of surface tension because of the fluid inside, as well as there will be a force of surface tension because of the fluid outside, and this type of force will be present everywhere. So the net force on any small length of this thread will be zero because of the fluid inside and the fluid outside. So visualize the force of surface tension due to the fluid inside the loop and due to the fluid outside the loop. On any small part, the force of surface tension will cancel out, so the net force will be zero. But as soon as we puncture the inner part, due to the force of surface tension on the outer part, this loop starts to expand, and finally this loop takes up a circular shape. So when you puncture the internal part, this loop takes up a circular shape only because of the forces present outside. So on puncturing the film, this loop takes up a circular shape. Now comes the question, how can we justify the same thing using the energy? So listen carefully. So on puncturing the loop takes up a circular shape. This question can be asked, so you should know the answer. Why? Because these internal forces vanish, but there are still forces of surface tension because of the outside part. Hence, the loop takes up a circular shape. Now, can we explain the same thing using energy? Yes. Listen to this argument carefully. For any given perimeter, a circle has maximum possible area. For any given perimeter, if I give you a particular length of loop and ask you, reset this loop in such a way such that the area enclosed by the loop should be maximum. So you will give it triangular shape, you will give it rectangular shape, or you will give it circular shape. So for any given perimeter, a circle has maximum area. As for any given perimeter, a circle has maximum area when the loop takes up circular shape. The area of the remaining film is minimum. When the area of the remaining film is minimum, as the loop's area is maximum, the potential energy of the system becomes minimum. The universe craves for stability, and stability is always attained at lower energy level. When we puncture this internal part, the loop takes up a circular shape, because for circular shape you get the maximum area. So the area of the remaining film is minimum. As the area of the remaining film is minimum, we will say that the surface potential energy is minimum. Now from here, this same argument, the universe craves for stability and stability is found at lower energy level, we can even answer why all the celestial bodies are spherical in shape. Because for any given volume, a sphere has minimum surface area. For any given volume, a sphere has minimum surface area. Now, if let's say things are forming from scratch, so there is a volume of matter. If this matter takes a spherical shape, then the surface area for this particular volume will be minimum. And as the surface area will be minimum, the surface potential energy will be minimum. That's why all celestial objects have got spherical shape. When they take up spherical shape for the same volume, the surface area is minimum. Since the surface area is minimum, the surface potential energy is minimum. So we can explain this circular shape even using energy or through the forces. Let's move on. A question here. There is a frame of rectangular shape on which you have formed a soap fill, and now there is a circular loop placed in it. Now this circular loop has taken circular shape. Why? Because there is force of surface tension due to the fluid in the surrounding. Once you know that this has got circular shape, question is what will be the tension developed in this loop? So if the surface tension of the film is T and the radius of the loop is R, determine the tension developed in the loop. What will be the tension developed in the loop? How to find? It's a standard process. Look at it. Look at some small part of this loop. Let's say this small part subtend an infinitely small angle d theta at the center, but I am drawing it big for us to understand. Now, let's say the tension developed in this loop is given by F. So a force of F here because of the remaining loop and a force F here due to the remaining loop. On this small part, there will be a force of surface tension due to the surrounding fill. Now, this force will be equal to the surface tension into length, and the length will be equals to r d theta. But this will be wrong as there are two surfaces. Okay. So this is the force of surface tension 2 into T into r d theta. A film has got two surfaces. Now, if I draw a line symmetrically, this angle will be d theta by 2 and this angle will be also d theta by 2. So this force applied by the remaining loop on this small part will also make an angle d theta by 2 with the vertical. And this force will also make an angle d theta by 2 with the vertical. So you will say F sine d theta by 2, the component towards the center, F sine d theta by 2 plus F sine d theta by 2. These two sum equals to 2t r d theta. So visualize a small part of loop. On this small part of loop, there will be forces because of the remaining loop, let's say F, and there will be a force of surface tension outwards. If we divide this d theta part into 2 halves, d theta by 2, d theta by 2. Now this force acts with the vertical at an angle of d theta by 2, and this force also acts with the vertical at an angle of d theta by 2. So taking the force component of these two forces due to the rest of the loop, you will say their component towards the center will be F sine d theta by 2 and also F sine d theta by 2. So you will say 2F sine d theta by 2 equals to force of surface tension. So 2F sine d theta by 2 equals to force of surface tension. On this small length subtending an angle d theta, the length will be r d theta. The force of surface tension will be 2t r d theta. So why a 2? Because it has got two surfaces. Now this is easy and done. For small value of theta, sine theta can be approximated to theta. So here you will get 2f d theta by 2 equals to 2t r d theta. Cancelling out 2 and d theta and d theta, you will get f equals to 2tr. So doing the same thing, in place of sine d theta by 2, we can approximate it to d theta by 2, cancel out 2 and 2. And on the right hand side, you have got 2tr d theta, cancel out d theta. So you get f equals to 2tr. Keep this in mind. Simple thing. Let's move on. Now we will talk about excess pressure. If you have got this rod made up of flexible material fixed at the two ends, and we apply a force in the horizontal direction from the left towards the right from the left, we know that if this rod is made up of flexible material, it will bend. Visualize a rubber rod. It will bend, and after bending, it will take up this curved shape. Now, once the rod has taken up the curved shape, we know on which side of the rod the force is higher. We will say that if the rod has been bent from the vertical state into this particular shape, then the force must be acting from the left. And if the same flexible rod takes up this shape, then the force must be acting from the right. Right? So what I am trying to explain here, just by looking at the shape of the surface, just by looking at the curvature of the surface, we can tell which side of the surface the pressure is higher. So due to the force, the shape of this flexible rod will change. Just by looking at the curvature of the surface, we know where the pressure is higher. How? Visualize a balloon. Somebody asks you where the pressure of gas is higher, inside the balloon or outside it. So you will say, if I look at one small part on the surface of balloon, the curvature tells me that the force from the inside has to be more than the force from the outside. That's why it took this type of curvature. So just by looking at the shape at a place on the surface, we can say that the pressure at A has to be more than the pressure at B. So if tomorrow you see this type of curvature somewhere, tell me where the pressure is more, at 1 or at 2. So sir, just by looking at curvature, if no force would have acted or equal force would have acted from both sides, it will be straight. But now it has taken up this shape. This means that the pressure from the side 1 has to be more than the pressure from the side 2. So we can, just by looking at the shape of this curvature, say that the pressure at 1 is more than the pressure at 2. And if we find this type of curvature, tell me where the pressure is more, at C or at D. So sir, if equal pressure, this would have been flat, but it is curved up. This means that the pressure from bottom is more than the pressure from top. Hence we can say the pressure at D is more than the pressure at C. And if we see this type of curvature, okay, then the force from the top has to be higher than the force from the bottom. So the pressure at X has to be more than the pressure at Y. So this is simple, right? So now let's talk about excess pressure in a drop. If you have a drop, I'm saying a drop, it is entirely liquid inside, a drop. I'm not saying bubble of fluid in air. In case of bubble, there is air inside, there is air outside. Here I'm talking about a drop. So if you have a drop, the pressure inside will be more or the pressure outside will be more. So you will say, sir, just by looking at the surface, we can say that the pressure inside has to be more than the pressure outside. Our mission here is that what is the difference in the pressure inside and outside for a drop? How to find? So as to find this, look at one half of the drop. Let's say we look at the right half of the drop. If we look at all the forces acting on this right half, just visualize the right half of the drop in 3D. So when you visualize the right half, so you will say, there is pressure inside, yes sir. There is pressure outside, yes sir. Because of the left half, there will be force of surface tension. Now the force of surface tension will act perpendicular to length along the surface. Now the surface is curved, so you must visualize these small lengths. The force of surface tension due to the other half will act perpendicular to the length along the surface. So if the surface tension is T, and this whole perimeter will be 2 pi r, the force of surface tension due to the left half will be T into 2 pi r. Due to the pressure inside, there will be one force on this half. That force will be equals to pressure inside into pi r square towards right. And due to the outside pressure, there will be a force towards left. And that pressure will be P outside into pi r square. Here we have taken projected area. The projected area for this hemisphere will be a circle of area pi r square. How to take up projected area? I will teach you guys in Gauss law. Do not worry. So we get P out into pi r square. So visualize the force profile. Due to the inside pressure, there is a force P in into pi r square. Due to the surface tension, there is a force towards left equals to T into 2 pi r. And due to the outside pressure, there is a force P out into the projected area, which will be pi r square. Now for equilibrium, from force balance, we can say that the net force towards right equals to net force towards left. The net force towards right is only because of P in into pi r square. And the net force towards left can be written as T into 2 pi r plus P out into pi r square. Or if you bring this term T into 2 pi r to the left hand side, you can write it as P in minus T into 2 pi r equals to P out into pi r square. Now bachcho, our mission is to find the excess pressure. So bring this term P out into pi r square to the left hand side and take pi r square common. So you get P in minus P out into pi r square equals to T into 2 pi r. Cancel out one term of pi, one term of pi, one term of r, one term of r. So what you get is P in minus P out. The delta P equals to 2T by r. So the pressure difference created is nothing but 2T by r. So delta P, P in minus P out equals to 2T by r. 2 times the surface tension upon the radius of the drop. This is asked inside which drop you will have more pressure. You have one big drop of water, one small drop of water. So the smaller the radius, the more is the pressure difference. Now outside pressure is same PATM. So inside pressure will be higher in case of small drop compared to big drop. Inside the big drop, the pressure will be less compared to small drop. Why? The small drop has got lower radius. So the pressure difference between outside and inside is higher for a small drop. Hence the inside pressure is higher for a small drop. We will practice more on this. So we say that the excess pressure in case of drop is 2T by r. If rather than having a drop, we have a bubble has got two surfaces. So when we look on the forces on the right half, the pressure inside into pi r square term remains the same. The pressure outside into pi r square term remains the same. It's just that since the bubble has got two surfaces, when you think of forces on one half, you get the force of surface tension on the inner surface as well as the force of surface tension on the outer surface. So in case of bubble, since it has got two surfaces, here you get an extra 2, an extra 2, an extra 2, and here also you get an extra 2. So remember that the excess pressure in a bubble, as it has two surfaces, comes out to be 4T by r. Double of that in case of a drop, because a bubble of soap in air has got two surfaces. Now delta P equals to 4T by. Now question is, if you have a bubble in atmosphere of radius r made up of material of surface tension T, the pressure outside is PATM. Can you tell me what will be the pressure inside? So you will say, sir, delta P for a bubble is 4T by r. Yes. This means that the pressure inside minus pressure outside, which is PATM in this case, equals to 4T by r. Hence the pressure inside equals to PATM plus 4T by r. So the pressure inside equals to PATM plus 4T by r. That's how we can write the inside pressure. Again I am saying, the smaller will be the radius, the smaller will be the denominator of the second term, the larger will be the second term, and greater will be value of pressure inside. Okay. Now let's move on to understand some application of this. So the question goes like, if a drop is found at a depth h below the surface of fluid of surface tension T and has a radius r, determine the pressure inside the drop. Now sir, why are you calling it a drop? Why not bubble? Because this is a drop of air trapped in a fluid. What is the difference between a drop of air trapped in the fluid and a bubble? In the case of drop of air, we have only a single surface. In case of bubble, we have got two surfaces. So if we have a soap bubble in air, it has got two surfaces, inside surface as well as outside surface. But if we have a drop of air trapped in a fluid, it has got only one surface. Inside there is air, outside there is fluid. So how to write the pressure here? You will say a bubble of air in water has a single surface. So here the pressure is PATM. Yes. Going down by distance h, pressure will increase by rho gh. So just outside this drop, the pressure will be PATM plus rho gh. We know that the excess pressure inside a drop is 2T by r. So going from outside to inside, the pressure will increase by 2T by r. Hence we can say the pressure inside has to be equals to PATM at top plus rho gh plus 2T by r. This will be the pressure inside the drop. Why sir you used 2T by r? It's a bubble, you should use 4T by r. Understand that air trapped inside water should be treated as a drop because it has a single surface, inside air, outside water. Let's move on. Question is, if two soap bubbles of radius r1 and r2 in vacuum coalesce to form a single bubble. Determine the radius of the single bubble. So there are two bubbles of radius R1 and R2 in vacuum, and these two bubbles coalesce to form a single bubble of, let's say, radius R. You need to find R in terms of R1 and R2, assuming that the temperature in the process remains constant. So if the temperature in the process remains constant, what will be the radius of this final bubble? Understand that here we have got two soap bubbles in vacuum. As these two soap bubbles are in vacuum, the outside pressure will be taken as 0, 0, 0. So the pressure inside the first bubble, it's a bubble, okay? So inside you have got air, then you have got soap film, outside there is vacuum. So there are two surfaces. Inside the first bubble, the pressure will be 40 by R1. 0 plus 40 by R1, 40 by R1. Inside the second bubble, the pressure will be 40 by R2. Outside pressure 0 because of vacuum, plus 40 by R2. Inside the third bubble, the pressure will be 40 by R. When these two bubbles coalesce to form a bigger bubble, from mole balance we can say P1V1 by RT1 plus P2V2 by RT2 equals to PV by RT. P1V1 by RT1 plus P2V2 by RT2 equals to PV by RT. Here we have assumed that temperature is constant. So we have written P1V1 by RT plus P2V2 by RT equals to PV by RT. Now bachcho, you can cancel out RT, RT, RT. So what you get is P1V1 plus P2V2 equals to PV. Now the pressure of the gas inside the first bubble will be 40 by R1. Outside 0, it's a bubble. So excess pressure is 40 by R. Radius is R1. So inside pressure is 0 plus 40 by R1. That is 40 by R1. Volume of the first bubble is 4 by 3 pi R1 cube. Pressure inside second bubble 40 by R2. Volume of second bubble 4 by 3 pi R2 cube. Pressure inside this bigger bubble form is 40 by R. And volume will be 4 by 3 pi R cube. So doing this thing, you get 40 by R1, pressure inside first bubble into its volume, plus pressure inside second bubble into its volume, equals to pressure inside this final bubble form multiplied by its volume. So here you can cancel out 4 pi by 3, 4 pi by 3, 4 pi by 3, 40, 40, 40. In the first term you have got R1 cube by R1. This becomes R1 square. In the second term you have got R2 cube by R2. This becomes R2 square. And in the term on the right hand side you have got R cube by R. That becomes R square. So what you get is R1 square plus R2 square equals to R square. Or you can say R comes out to be equals to root R1 square plus R2 square. Okay? Important question, simple question. Let's move on. The question goes like, there are two bubbles connected by a tube. As you can see, one bubble has got greater radius and one bubble has got smaller radius. So question is, what happens on opening the stopcock? So if you open up this wall, the air will move from which bubble to which bubble? Bigger to smaller or smaller to bigger? We know that the excess pressure inside a bubble is given by 40 by R. So the one which has got smaller radius will have more excess pressure and hence more pressure inside. So when radius decreases, the excess pressure increases. Hence the pressure inside the smaller bubble is higher. The pressure inside the smaller bubble is higher. So when you open up this stopcock, what our intuition tells us is that the air must flow from the bigger bubble into the smaller bubble and hence both of them should attain the same size, right? That's not at all the case. The air actually moves from the smaller bubble into the bigger bubble. The smaller bubble, as it keeps on getting smaller and smaller, its radius keeps on decreasing and decreasing, and the pressure inside it keeps on increasing and increasing. So the smaller bubble gets smaller and the bigger bubble gets bigger, and this smaller bubble finally collapses. So hence the pressure inside the smaller bubble is higher. So on opening the stopcock, the smaller bubbles become smaller and the larger bubble becomes larger as the air flows from higher pressure, which is within the smaller bubble, to the lower pressure, which is inside the larger bubble. So this is a counterintuitive question, that's why I asked. Let's move on to the next one. Now we will talk about double bubble. Sir, what is a double bubble? While taking bath, you must have observed it sometime. Over a bubble, another bubble is formed, right? So this particular structure is called double bubble. Now, if you have this double bubble. Think and tell me how the interface between these two bubbles will look like option 1, like option 2, or like option 3. So it will look like 1, 2, or 3. Since we know that inside the smaller bubble pressure will be higher, yes. Since inside the smaller bubble the pressure will be higher, if I take here pressure as P1 and here P2, P2 has to be more than P1. Now here you have to do the reverse engineering. You have to think that, okay, by knowing the curvature, I can tell on which side the pressure is higher. Then by knowing on which side the pressure is higher, I can tell what the curvature will look like. Since the pressure inside this smaller bubble will be larger, the curvature must be like this, because there will be more forces from this side, the smaller bubble, and less forces from the other side where the radius is higher, so the pressure is lower. Now, once this has been established, this will be the shape of the interface. Question is, what will be the radius of this interface? So let's say this interface has some radius r dash. How to find it? Quite easy. You will say the pressure inside the first bubble of radius r1 will be P atm plus 40 by r1. The pressure inside this second bubble of smaller radius r2 will be P atm plus 40 by r2. So you can say the pressure inside first bubble equals to P atm plus 40 by r1. The pressure inside second bubble equals to P atm plus 40 by r2. Now the interface separating these two small bubbles has a radius r dash. Inside the smaller bubble the pressure is P2. Inside the bigger bubble the pressure is P1. So the pressure difference between them will be P2 minus P1. And this P2 minus P1, the pressure difference, will be equal to 4T by the radius of the interface, which is r dash. Remember that P2 minus P1 equals to 4T by r dash. This interface will also have two surfaces because it's made up of film. So here you will say P2 minus P1 equals to this minus this, 40 by r1 minus 40 by r2 equals to 40 by r dash. Subtracting this P2 minus P1, you will say from P2 minus P1, 40 by r2 minus 40 by r1 equals to 40 by r dash. Subtract now these two, P2 minus P1, P atm get cancelled, you get 40 by r2 minus 40 by r1. Now cancelling out 40, 40, 40, you get 1 by r2 minus 1 by r1 equals to 1 by r dash. So from here you can write r1 minus r2 upon r1 r2 equals to 1 by r dash, or r dash equals to r1 r2 upon r1 minus r2, flipping both the side. So r dash equals to r1 r2 upon r1 minus r2. So this is the radius of the interface of the double bubble. Now one more question gets asked, what is the angle here? What is the angle? So here understand that at all three places, if you just visualize this point, due to all three the forces have to be same. If three forces of same magnitude add up to 0 resultant, then the angle between the forces has to be 120 degree. That's why this angle will be 120, this angle will be 120, this angle will be 120. So the angle at the interface between the two surfaces, that angle comes out to be 120, as the magnitude of force is same. So forces acting at same angle of 120, 120, 120 cancel out each other. So let's move on. So now we will talk about angle of contact. What is the meaning of angle of contact? If you ever pour water in a glass, we know that the surface is not flat. It takes up this curved shape. Now the angle of contact is the angle made by the fluid surface. Draw a tangent at the place you wish to find the angle with the solid surface inside the fluid. So for water glass, we know that the angle of contact is an angle less than 90 degree, hence the angle of contact is acute. So angle of contact is the angle made by the fluid surface with the solid surface inside the fluid. So for water and glass, this is over as a rated diagram, but the angle of contact we can see is the angle made by the fluid surface with the solid surface inside the fluid. So this is our angle of contact. Now, in case of water and glass, the angle of contact is acute. What if we place mercury in a glass beaker? So you have seen so many diagrams of barometers. For mercury glass, you get this type of shape. So what is the angle of contact? Angle of contact is the angle made by fluid surface with the solid surface inside the fluid. So for mercury and glass, the angle of contact comes out to be an obtuse angle. So for mercury and glass, angle of contact is the angle made by the fluid surface with the solid surface inside the fluid, not outside the fluid, inside the fluid. So for mercury and glass, the angle of contact is obtuse. Now sometimes we see that a fluid wets a surface and sometimes it does not. For example, if you see a dew of water formed on the top of leaf, it does not wet the leaf. It is just there, a spherical drop placed over the leaf. It can move if you move the leaf gently, right? It is not wetting the surface. So when does a fluid wets the surface and when the fluid does not wet the surface? So if the angle of contact, which is the angle made by the fluid surface with the solid surface inside the fluid, is acute, then the fluid wets the surface. If the angle of contact is obtuse, the angle made by the fluid surface with the solid surface inside the fluid is obtuse, then we say the fluid is not wetting the surface. So for acute angle of contact, the fluid wets the surface, and for obtuse angle of contact, the fluid do not wet the surface. So fluid wets the surface for acute theta, angle of contact being acute, and fluid does not wet the surface for obtuse theta when the angle of contact is obtuse. Now let's talk about capillary rise and fall. We know that for water and glass, the angle of contact is acute. And for mercury and glass, the angle of contact is obtuse. Just for fun, for silver and glass, the angle of contact is 90 degree. If you pour water in a silver beaker, then the surface is horizontal. You don't get acute angle of contact, you don't get obtuse angle of contact, you get a flat surface. The angle of contact is 90 degree. So what happens when we place a glass capillary tube into water? So on placing it, we know that the angle of contact is acute. Yes sir. So this type of surface is formed. Okay. Now visualize 4 points. Point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. You can see that point 1 and point 3 are in atmosphere. Yes sir. So pressure at point 1 equals to pressure at point 3 equals to P atm. Okay sir. Now tell me, between point 1 and point 2, which point will be at higher pressure? So just by looking at the shape of the curvature, we can tell the pressure at point 1 is more than the pressure at point 2. So if I ask you, tell me kids, at point 2 pressure will be more than P atm or less than P atm? So you'll say, sir, at 1 the pressure is P atm, and the pressure at 1 has to be more than the pressure at 2 just by looking at the shape, I can say. So the pressure at 2 has to be less. So the pressure at 2 is less than atmospheric pressure, while the pressure at 3 is same as atmospheric pressure, and the point 4, which is little lower inside the fluid, the pressure will be more than P atm. So at the same horizontal level, at 2 the pressure is less than P atm, at 4 the pressure at 4 is more than P atm by little bit. This means that the fluid will flow from outside into the tube till the time at the same horizontal level the pressure do not become same. So we can say the pressure at point 1 equals to pressure at point 3 equals to P atm. Yes sir. And due to concavity of this surface, we can say that the pressure at point 1 is greater than point 2, or which is the pressure at point 2 is less than P atm. So P2 is less than P atm, as the pressure at point 2 is less than P atm. And for the same height, we need to have the same pressure. The fluid moves from outside into the tube so that the liquid level here rises, and the fluid keeps on entering till the time the pressure at point 2 do not become equals to the pressure at point 4, which is P atm. Hence, fluid flows in the tube till the pressure at point 2 do not become equals to P atm. So the fluid flows from outside into the tube and the liquid level rises till the time the pressure at point 2 do not become equal to P atm. That's why when we immerse a glass tube inside water, the liquid level rises. Why do we find a dip in case of mercury? Let's see. If you have got mercury and in mercury you place a glass tube, what happens? Sir, we know that for mercury and glass the angle of contact is obtuse, so we get this type of curvature. Now again visualize 4.1234. At 1 and at 3 pressure is P atm. At 2 tell me pressure will be more than P atm or less than P atm. So just by looking at the concavity of surface and there are point 1 and 2, we know that pressure at point 2 has to be higher. Now see, at point 2 pressure will be more than P atm because of concavity, and at 4 the pressure will be just higher than P atm, it is just below. So the fluid flows from the tube from point 2 outside towards point 4 till the time the pressure at point 2 do not become equals to P atm. We can say due to concavity of surface the pressure at 2 is more than the pressure at 1. Hence the pressure at 1, which is P atm, so pressure at 1 equals to same as pressure at 3 equals to P atm. So the fluid moves out of the tube and the fluid level dips. So here the level will dip as the fluid will move out of the tube. Why? Because of the concavity of the surface. So now we will talk about the formula of capillary rise. So we know that if we immerse a glass tube in water, the fluid rises up. Let's say the angle of contact is theta and we get this type of meniscus. Now because of this concave surface, we will have some pressure difference between the upper part and lower part. Since we have a single surface, the excess pressure created by it will be 2T by R, where R is the radius of the surface, not at all the radius of the tube. And we even have learned the fluid will keep on rising till the time the pressure of this point does not become equal to P atm. So how to find this height? First, to find this height, we need to know what is the pressure difference created because of this curved surface. And to know the pressure difference created because of this curved surface, we need to know its radius. So what to do? Better zoom in on this part and visualize the surface. So this is the surface. These two are the sides of the tube and this is the angle of contact. Now if you think of this particular surface to be part of a bigger sphere, think of a horizontal line. If this angle of contact is theta, this angle will be 90 minus theta. Let's say the radius of this sphere is r, radius of this spherical surface is r, and the radius of tube is small r. If this angle is 90 minus theta, then this angle has to be 90 minus theta, that will be theta. What is this small r? The radius of the tube. What is this capital R? The radius of the surface, the curved surface. What will be the relationship between capital R and small r? So as you know that this angle is theta, you will say that r cos theta equals to small r. Just look into this right angle triangle. Okay, hypotenuse r, the base length equals to radius of the capillary tube. So you can write r cos theta equals to r, or the radius of curvature of this curved surface equals to the radius of the tube by cos theta. Once this has been established, game over. You can write P atm. Going from here to here, pressure will decrease or increase. So since the curvature is this way, upside pressure is higher, lower side pressure is lower. So you will write P atm minus 2T by capital R plus rho gh equals to the pressure of this point, and the fluid will keep on rising till the time the pressure of this point do not become equals to P atm. Once more, P atm minus 2T by R, where R is capital R, the radius of curvature of this curved surface, plus rho gh equals to P atm. This is the only equation we need to write. So you write P atm minus 2T by R plus rho gh equals to P atm. Cancel out P atm both the side. So you get rho gh equals to 2T by R. In place of R, substitute small r by cos theta. Once you do it, you get rho gh equals to 2T by R by cos theta. The cos theta moves from denominator to the numerator. So what you get is h equals to 2T cos theta by rho rg. This rho and g moves down, so rho rg. Okay, so the height of fluid in the capillary tube comes out to be 2T cos theta by rho rg. Notice that the height is inversely proportional to the radius of the tube. So if the radius of the tube becomes half, the height becomes double. Radius of the tube becomes 1/3, the height becomes triple. So the height is inversely proportional to the radius of the tube. This particular statement is called Zurind's law. Zurind's law tells us that height is inversely proportional to radius. Okay, keep this thing in mind. So now let's see important points about capillary rise. The first point, if you have placed a capillary tube in a container and it is placed inside a lift, and let's say the lift goes up with an acceleration a. So beta, in the formula h equals to 2t cos theta by rho rg. In place of g, substitute g effective, which will be g plus a, if the lift goes up with an acceleration a. If the lift goes down with an acceleration a, then in place of g simply write g minus a. So if the lift goes up with an acceleration a, then the height comes out to be 2t cos theta upon rho r g plus a. In place of g, substitute g plus a. If the lift goes down with an acceleration a, then in place of this acceleration g, you will write g minus a. So the height comes out to be 2t cos theta upon rho r g minus a. If this whole lift do free fall, so if the lift falls freely, then its downward acceleration will be g. Then the g effective will be 0. So this denominator part becomes 0. So the height becomes infinite. Beta, you can't have infinite height of capillary rise in the tube. The maximum height that the fluid can rise is when it fills up the entire tube. So then g effective for free fall comes out to be 0. So the fluid completely fills the tube. You shouldn't say that when g effective becomes 0, the height becomes infinity. No. It simply fills up the entire length of the tube. If the capillary tube is taken into space, again the g effective will be 0. So the fluid will fill the entire length of the tube. Keep this in mind, when g effective becomes 0, the fluid fills the entire length of the tube. The second case, if you have tilted the capillary tube. So if the capillary tube is tilted, remember that the height to which the fluid rises remains the same. The height to which the fluid rises remains the same. So length of fluid in the tube will increase. This length is definitely more than h, but the height to which the fluid rises remains the same. So if the capillary tube is tilted, the height to which the fluid rises remains the same. This height to which the fluid rises remains the same. Hence you can say L sine theta equals to h, while the length of the fluid in the tube changes. Here you can see that there is more length of fluid in the tube. So length of the fluid in the tube will change, but the height to which the fluid will rise remains the same. So one can say that L sine theta equals to h. Now the third important point, if the capillary is of insufficient length, let's say we have placed in water a tube, and let's say in this tube the fluid rises up to a height of 5 centimeter. Okay. If we now take the capillary tube out, break it, and in the same water, the same tube, but it has been broken, so its length is less. Now let's say the entire length of capillary tube placed in water has a length of 3 centimeter. Now tell me what will happen to the fluid. So again the fluid will rise till the top and it will take a new value of theta, and that theta will be such that it corresponds to the height of 3 centimeter. Sir, I haven't understood. Let's see. If the capillary tube is of insufficient length less than the height up to which the fluid wants to rise, that is the meaning of capillary tube of insufficient length, then the fluid rises till the top and the angle made by fluid surface with the solid surface changes. So this angle theta changes. If let's say you have got a height h dash less than h, then you can write the equation this way. Let's say now we have a new angle theta dash. You will write equation as h equals to 2t cos theta by rho rg, and h dash equals to 2t cos theta dash upon rho rg. Dividing both the side, 2t, rho rg get cancelled. So you get h upon h dash equals to cos theta upon cos theta dash. So dividing both the side, h upon h dash equals to cos theta upon cos theta dash. So again the fluid rises till the top, but the angle made by the fluid surface with the solid surface changes, so theta changes, and you can compute that theta using this particular formula. So that's all in surface tension. See you guys in next hour, where we will start talking about SHM. And before you start doing SHM, I recommend you to revise unit circle from trigonometry part. revise unit circle from the trigonometry part. See you guys. Bye bye. So that's all for now. See you guys in the next hour.